already. This is
It's great. It only took me 23 years. So
yeah, I was listening to you on Rogan's podcast actually talking about how nobody really realizes how long and like tiny little step by step this whole process.
Support from France and under the military leadership of General George Washington, won the Revolutionary War and peace was achieved in 1783. During and after the war, the 13 states united into a weak federal government through the Confederate Constitution. When the Confederate Constitution proved inadequate, a new constitution was adopted in 1789. This remained the basis of the United States government and later included the Bill of Rights. A strong national government was established with Washington as the first president and Alexander Hamilton as chief financial advisor. During the first party system, two national political parties formed to support or oppose Hamilton's policies. When Thomas Jefferson became president, he purchased the Louisiana Territory from France, doubling the size of the United States. A second and final war with Britain occurred in 1812. The main result of this war was the end of European support for Native American, Indian, attacks against settlers in the American West. Under the auspices of the Jeffersonian and Jacksonian movements, the United States expanded into the Louisiana Purchase and all the way to California and Oregon, seeking cheap land for yeoman farmers and slaveholders who promoted democracy and territorial expansion at the expense of violence and contempt for European culture. This territorial expansion under the guise of Manifest Destiny was a rejection of the Whig Party's advice to promote economic and social depth and modernization rather than mere geographical expansion. Slavery was abolished in all northern states, north of the Mason-Dixon line dividing Pennsylvania and Maryland, by 1804, but flourished in the southern states because of the great demand for cotton from Europe. After 1820, a series of compromises helped to ease the confrontation between the North and the South over the issue of slavery. By the mid-1850s, the newly formed Republicans took control of Northern politics and promised to prevent the spread of slavery, implying that slavery would eventually be phased out. The election of Republican Abraham Lincoln as president in 1860 sparked the secession of 11 slave states to form the Confederate States of America in 1861. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, is central to American history. After 4 years of bloody fighting, the North, led by President Lincoln and General Ulysses S. Grant, defeated the South, led by General Robert E. Lee. The Union was preserved and slavery abolished, and the South was devastated. Reconstruction era, 1863 to 1877, the United States ended slavery and extended voting and legal rights to freed people, African Americans who had previously been slaves. The national government became stronger, and thanks to the 14th Amendment, it now had a clear mandate to protect individual rights. Reconstruction ended in 1877, and from the 1890s to the 1960s, Jim Crow laws kept blacks in a position of economic, social, and political inferiority. The entire South remained impoverished until the second half of the 20th century, while the North and West grew rapidly and prospered. The United States became the world's leading industrial power at the turn of the 20th century, thanks to a boom in private enterprise in the North and the immigration of millions of workers and farmers from Europe. The national railroad system was completed. Factories and large-scale mining operations industrialized the Northeast and Midwest. Middle-class dissatisfaction with corruption, inefficiency, and traditional politics fueled a radical movement from the 1890s to the 1920s that pressed for reforms, including women's suffrage and prohibition of alcohol, which was eventually repealed in 1933. The United States was initially neutral in World War I, but declared war on Germany in 1917 and financed the victorious Allies the following year. After a decade of prosperity in the 1920s, the Wall Street stock market crash of 1929 marked the beginning of a decade-long worldwide Great Depression. Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt became president and implemented relief, reconstruction, and reform programs, collectively known as the New Deal, which shaped modern American liberalism. After Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the United States entered World War II on the side of the Allies and helped defeat Nazi Germany in Europe and Imperial Japan in the Far East. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers after World War II and initiated a Cold War, indirectly confronting each other in the arms race and the space race. U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War was built around containing communism, and the United States entered the wars in Korea and Vietnam to achieve this goal. Liberalism achieved numerous victories during the New Deal years and then in the mid-1960s, especially with the success of the Civil Rights Movement, but conservatism turned the tables in the 1980s under President Ronald Reagan. The Cold War ended with the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, leaving the United States as the sole remaining superpower. As the 21st century began, international conflict centered around the Middle East and reached a fever pitch following the events of September 11, 2001, and the subsequent declaration of the War on Terror. The United States experienced its worst economic recession since World War II in the late 2000s, followed by a period of slower than normal economic growth throughout the 2010s. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel to receive new videos.